Anyway, it's time for How To, where we offer some advice on the sorts of decisions we don't take every day. Today, it's how to leave the Catholic Church. Michael Nugent is chair of Atheist Ireland. Afternoon, Michael.
Good afternoon.
Is the short answer that you can't leave the Catholic Church?
Well, of course, you can leave in reality by just ignoring it.
Yeah.
But the Catholic Church believes that you can't leave once you've been baptised. They think once you're baptised, you have a link with the Catholic Church forever. It's worse than the Hotel California. But they, but there is a separate thing, which I mean, they can excommunicate you, or there was the formal defection process. Now, what that involves is, from the Catholic Church's perspective, is you're removed from the benefits of the church, or what they consider to be the benefits. You know, you can't get married in church, you can't have Christian burial, and so on. But you're still technically a Catholic. Right.
Okay, that's a Jesuitical difference, but I suppose they specialise in that kind of thing. So for if you were to be excommunicated, what would you have to do to get kicked out?
Well, this was always the case, that before this formal act of defection was there for a while, that you could get excommunicated. The main things are heresy, which is just denying something that the church believes is to be true. Apostasy, which is just completely repudiating the Christian faith. Or a schism, which is refusing to accept the authority of the Pope. Another one is procuring an abortion. If you do any of those things, it's not even the case that if you do those things you can be excommunicated. If you do those things, you're automatically excommunicated.
Right, okay, you don't even have to tell them you've done those things.
No, you're just automatically excommunicated, and therefore you won't be able to get any of the benefits of being in the Catholic Church.
But say if you kind of wrote to your bishop and said, I don't accept the authority of the church, I don't accept the Christian faith, and I had an abortion, is there a formal process then where he'd send you back a letter and say, right, you're out?
Well, there was for a while, and the context of that was in 1983, the Catholic Church changed their canon law to include this concept of formal defection. Now, what they were including it for, it wasn't really to enable people to defect, it was to regulate people who had formally defected from being able to get married in certain circumstances. Particularly, there were problems in places like Germany and Austria where there's a church tax, and you can leave the church, legally with the state, and then you don't have to pay the church tax that goes to the church. So there were situations like that affected it. So they brought in this rule, but in practice nobody knew what it meant, and different dioceses were implementing it differently. And so in 2006 they came up with this formal process just to define it, to try and put some sort of regulation on it. And what they said was the case then was that there had to be three elements to it. First of all, you had to internally leave. You had to just decide yourself to leave. Then you had to manifest it outwardly in some way. And thirdly, which is the big kicker, is that an ecclesiastical authority had to agree with you. So you had to convince a bishop or a chancellor or a priest that you genuinely want to leave. A friend of mine left back in the 80s, Ken McHugh, and he had to do interviews in the Archdiocese office to convince them that he was that he was sane and of sound mind. The implication being if he wasn't of sound mind, they would keep him. but if he was, they would recognise that he intended to defect. So that then put a process in place that you could defect. But what that then did as a knock-on effect, once this became known that they had this process in place for their own internal reasons, people like the people who founded CountMeOut.ie realised, well, we can use this process, for our purposes to show that we don't want the church to be claiming us as members. Obviously, we can leave in our own minds, but we don't want the Catholic Church, particularly in the context back then, like it was when the sex abuse scandals were at their height, or at least the revelations of the sex abuse scandals were at their height. They didn't want, and rightly so, and there were people who were hurt, and it was cathartic for people to be able to say, we don't want the Catholic Church to be claiming us as members. So what they did was that these three people in Ireland set up CountMeOut.ie to enable people to send letters to their bishops, as you've said, to say, we want to take advantage of this process. And what they would do if they successfully got through that process, what the church said they would do is they would put a note on your baptismal register record saying that you have formally defected. Now, bear in mind, in their mind, they still believe that you're actually a Catholic, even though you've defected. So you could do that. But then what happened was there was still confusion as to how, within the church as to how this thing would work. So they ended up just dropping that in 2010. The Catholic Church said, "Okay, we're leaving this formal defection process. It's gone."
No.
And then the diocese started saying, "Well, okay, we can't any longer mark on your record that you defected because that concept doesn't exist in canon law anymore." But some of them, the Dublin Archdiocese said, as a compromise, they said, we'll record, this is another Jesuit link, we'll record on your record your desire to defect.
But not actually your actual defection.
But not actual defection. And so at that stage, the people who were running Count Me Out said, well, look, that's just not good enough. So they stopped doing Count Me Out. They passed on the domain name to Atheist Ireland, and we run it now, and we've redirected it to a site called notme.ie, which is essentially a symbolic version of what Count Me Out was doing, that you can just symbolically record your defection, although it's not really a Catholic Church thing. So it's now in practice what's happening at the moment though is and this isn't just in Ireland, it's all over the world. Each diocese just makes up their own mind what they're doing. So depending on your archbishop or bishop or something, they might put a record, they mightn't, they might talk to you, they mightn't. One thing that a member of Atheist Ireland has found is that they will accept, at least his bishop accepted membership of Atheist Ireland as proof of apostasy. So that got him out.
Yeah, all right.
But again, it's like the rules of Quidditch. You know, it's just that they make up whatever they want, depending on.
But just to stress that point, even if they say, right, you're not a Catholic anymore, there's still a record of you being baptised in the Catholic Church, an inherent belief that you're still a Catholic, essentially, just that you don't feel like it at the moment, or you know.
They accept that you might see the error of your ways and come back to them. But technically, the baptism is the big thing as far as they're concerned. That once you're baptised, that's it forever.
Do they have the legal right to hang on to those records?
Well, this is a second element of it, that independently of what they believe as a church, and in fairness, and I genuinely mean this, they're entitled to believe whatever they want to believe as a church. You know, that's freedom of religion, and they're entitled to believe that. But there is in Europe GDPR regulations, which is about data protection. And one of the rules of data protection is that you're not allowed to keep inaccurate records of people or keep records of people against their wishes. So people are challenging the Catholic Church, and there's one person in particular who is challenging the GDPR commissioner here, saying that because 2 years ago he asked the GDPR to commissioner here to tell the Catholic Church to delete his records. They have been delaying on dealing with that. They said they would do an investigation into the church itself, and they asked the various bishops, and different bishops gave different answers and so on. But he's just literally this week is taking a judicial review case at the High Court, asking the Data Protection Commissioner to speed up that process and come to a conclusion about whether or not under civil law. I remember Michael McDowell once famously said that canon law in state law has the same status as the internal rules of a tennis club. So the question that'll be determined there is whether they have to delete the records under civil law as opposed to under canon law.
Yeah. So just to recap, but say for instance, Michael, it's the person isn't an atheist. Say the person was born a Catholic and says, I want to go and be a Muslim now. Is what happens? Does the Catholic Church still think, even though you've gone and become a Muslim, you're still a Catholic? Is this Schrodinger's religion? Kind of, you're both things at the same time.
It is kind of theologically. I mean, they will accept that under. I mean, that would count under apostasy and heresy and schism. You know, it would count under all those as excommunicating them. So they wouldn't they wouldn't be able to avail of what the Catholic Church considers to be the benefits of being a Catholic. But they still have in theological terms, they still have the connection through baptism with Catholicism.
Right. Okay. So, and the apostasy method of leaving the Catholic Church, even if it's in that limited way, that's up to a bishop, or that's up to an archbishop who could make a call on that. Yeah,
it's up to each diocese, it seems to be. And it seems even both before the 1983 introduction of this formal process, and after it was removed in 2010, and presumably in between as well, like each diocese seemed to be just doing things based on what they felt like anyway. Yeah. I mean, they do have quite an amount of autonomy, bishops under Catholic law. So it depends on the bishop that you have. Now, I think it's an important cathartic option for people who have been hurt by the church and who don't want the church to be claiming them as members, to be able to do something about it. And I think it's very important that people for whom that will help should do that and would encourage them to do it. But I would also say to them, if the Catholic Church doesn't do that, don't worry about it. Don't feel that you're trapped by them, because we all have freedom of religion and belief to decide ourselves what we believe.
Michael Nugent is chair of Atheist Ireland. Michael, thanks a million.